we have is a whirling sound in the rear end under acceleration and deceleration. So in preparation to find out what that noise is, I blocked the front wheels, and in the back we're going to be jacking that up and placing the rear axle on some jack stands. If you don't have the assistance of power tools, you will have to break loose the tightness of the lugs on the rear wheels before jacking it up. To make more room back here, I did drop the spare tire, and I took the heat shield off for the tire by the exhaust. Okay, I have it jacked up and then placed a couple jack stands under the axles. Many times you can tell if the pinion bearing is really bad. If there's a lot of play in here, the pinion bearing is bad and you'll have to replace that. So, back of the differential here, you can just take and pull these wires off here. There's a couple that are studded. We'll go ahead and pull that off. It takes some brake clean up the area here. And I'm going to remove all the bolts. I'm going to leave one on the very top, just halfway in, and then we're going to break loose the cover here and drain the oil. Okay, I'm just going to mark here with a little paint marker where the long screws go, the little stud on the end. Then I'm going to take a putty knife and pound it in here a little bit. This is a painter's tool. Pound it in here behind the cover, and that'll break the bond of the gasket and the oil will leak out. I do have a bolt in the top here to keep it from falling off. What you want to do is clean this up real good and make sure there is no metal filings in there. It's not too bad. We'll go ahead and clean this surface up all the way around here, and then we'll go and work on the pinion side. Okay. Going to scrape this off a little bit, and then I'm going to take a little Scotch-Brite and clean off this surface here. And I'm just going to put a rag over everything, keep any debris out of there. So now that this surface is pretty clean here, what I'm going to do is go and turn the key on, place the truck in neutral. What we're going to do is disconnect the drive shaft from the pinion flange here. And we're going to take a paint marker and mark the correlation where this flange meets the drive shaft to keep the balancing the same. Okay, I have that marked. This is a 12 millimeter 12 point. And we're just going to go straight on here and remove this bolt. Ford recommends that you take these bolts and replace them once you take them off. So what you'll have to do is put it in park and break these loose, and then put it in neutral and spin it around to do the other side. And you'll need to take and put a breaker bar on here. These are on awfully tight. Okay, on your last bolt here, once you take it out, make sure you're hanging onto your drive shaft, and we'll go ahead and drop that down. You don't want to drop it on top of you. What I'm doing now is marking the flange on the bolt, and then I'm going to take and count or measure the depth here on this. There is a locking tab on the top. We're going to take and move that out with a screwdriver here and a hammer, and I'm going to measure this depth here to the top of the pinion to the nut there, so we get it in the same spot. Okay, I'm going to take a depth gauge here and make sure the pinion to the nut is this when I reinstall it. Okay, at the end of your pinion here, you can see the threads. You want to count the threads. This one has a special locking thing on there. I broke the tip of my screwdriver trying to get it off, so just going to zip it off. Got it braced here with a screwdriver in one of the holes, and I'm just going to zip that nut off of there. Okay, now I have to take this pinion flange off here, so I jammed a screwdriver up in there and I put a 2-jaw puller on there. I'll just keep tightening this up until it comes off. Okay, pull that pinion off, the pinion flange off. This will stay on there on the back. It's just a little dust shield. And here is where you need to take the seal out. Okay, I'm going to take that little painter's tool. It's got a little chisel edge on it. I'm just going to tap that in here. Keep working that around. And all edges there to get this seal out of there. Okay, once you get that seal pried away, you can stick a screwdriver in there, pound it in there, and take your seal out. Now you can reach in, pull your bearing out, and we'll inspect that real closely. Okay, there's a washer that holds that on there. Took that off, and inspecting the bearing here, there is some discoloration on there. So I have a new bearing and race, and to get the race out we have to take the gear set out of the back. Okay, on the back side of the differential there is a 8mm that we are going to remove. This is a special bolt that goes all the way through into this pin. Then we will reach in here and push this pin out. Next we'll remove the wheels from both sides in the rear. Okay, now that we got the wheel off, what we're going to do is take the caliper and bracket off in one. We're going to put a piece of wire on there, tie it up so there's no stress on it, and we're going to take the two caliper bracket bolts off the back. We'll just take and push the axle all the way in, because it's out here. We'll go and push it all the way in. We'll go inside the differential and take the C-clip out. So up in here, now that the axle is pushed in, we'll reach in there and take this C-clip out. Now we can pull that axle back, and we'll do that the same on this side here. And I marked it right and left with a paint marker. When we take these out, this whole assembly will come out and we can get to our pinion. Okay, I'll take these bolts out here. This whole assembly will come out now that the axles are out. And you want to just put the bolts in there just a couple threads so it doesn't fall out on you. Now, the important part is there's shims that are up in here. You want to make sure that you get the shims don't fall out, because that determines your gear lash. So you're going to want to look on here, make sure that that surface isn't all gouged up, and look closer at your bearing here. And it's got a real dullness to it and a little bit of burning on there, so we'll go ahead and replace this bearing. What we're going to do is put a bearing separator in there and then pull it off of here. So to remove this here, I don't have a bearing separator large enough to get underneath here. So what I'm going to do is take and cut with a Dremel tool the outer race, and then I'm going to clamp it on the inner race and then pull it off. Okay, got that race cut, so I'll just peel it apart and then peel it off of here. Okay, now that I got that off of there, we'll go ahead and clamp this onto the inner race, and we'll go ahead and pull it off of here. So I got it clamped here on the ridge on the inner race there. Tighten these down, and I'm going to go ahead and just keep turning this screw here, and then it'll pull the bearing race off of there. Okay, got her broke loose here. There is a washer. This is also a shim for the right spacing. We'll put that on with the new bearing. Okay, you can see the race there. The outer race is all this little bit scuffed up there. So we're going to go ahead and replace them. Just take a punch here, and we're going to go and knock this one out, and then come from the other side, grab that lip there, and knock it out. Okay. So beyond the pinion bearing, the carrier bearings here, you can see they're all chewed to God knows what. So we're going to go ahead and pull those off and replace them as well. Okay, what I did was I cut the race off there on the carrier bearings with a cut-off wheel on a Dremel tool. And then what I did was I scored the bearing, the inner bearing race, took a hammer and a chisel, and wearing eye protection, I hit it on the score there. It cracked the bearing race, and I was able to take it off. The problem was it was very stubborn, and I put the bearing splitter on there, and chunks just broke off and went shooting across the room. So I suggest, if you can't get it off, going and doing that. So now if you wanted to take and put your new bearing on there, you'd get your new bearing, and you could on one side pound it on. However, the bearing sticks out, so if you had it down like this and you flipped it over, your new bearing will be on the bottom and it'll get damaged. So if you don't have a press, what you want to do is get yourself a long bolt, some very thick washers. These happen to be grade 8, but it's not absolutely necessary. We'll stack those up in behind there, and we'll run this through the bearing driver, and the bearing will run this bolt down, and that'll suck the bearing on there, and we'll do that on both sides. Okay, I have my bearing installer apparatus set up here. Got several washers stacked up there. Coming to the top here, I have a bearing driver that'll fit the inner race, and I got a little spacer here of a piece of pipe, and then I have my bolt here. So I will need a wrench to hold it on the bottom there, and we'll tighten up the top. I'm going to use an impact to make it go a little faster. With the first few turns, to make sure it's on there straight, I'm just going to use a couple of wrenches. Okay, you'll hear a change in sound when it's fully seated. So we'll go and put our impact on reverse. Flip our unit over and do the other side. Okay, took a little bit to get this lined up here good. And in the back side here, and I have the unit supported by a block of wood, so this one is not even on the ground getting damaged. And we'll go ahead and put the impact on there, tighten that up until it bottoms out on the back side there. Okay, it turns freely like it should. We'll go ahead and back the bolt out of there. Ready to install it. Okay, now we're on to installing the pinion bearing here. There was a shim on the bottom of the old one. We're going to leave that on there. I got a genuine Ford replacement. We're going to place it on there, and then we're going to take a piece of exhaust pipe. I'll place that over the top here, and that will go on neatly on this inner race here. And I'm going to put this on the top. It's just an old pulley. And then I'm going to take a 4-pound hammer and gently tap that on there. Okay, you'll know when it's bottomed out when you hear it change tone when you're hammering. We're all set here to install this now. These are the parts that I had purchased. Yours may differ. You'll have to bring your VIN number into Ford, as well as on your door pillar there'll be an axle code. So for the pinion bearing, I'm ready to drive the race in. However, my small kit here doesn't have a driver big enough, so I just put a couple together with the old race, and I'll go ahead clean that up real good with brake clean, and then I'm going to drive that in. Okay, that side's all seated. I'm gonna check the mating surface for the other side, drive that race in, make sure it's free of defects, that there's no high spots or anything, and we'll put the race in on the other side. Okay, now that we have that race in the back, what we're going to do is I have the new bearing. We're going to put the new bearing in after we lubricate it with some gear lube, full synthetic, and then I'm going to put this little washer behind there and then drive the oil seal on. If you look, you can see this Ford oil seal, the extra rubber sticks out a little bit proud. So if you try to drive it home with a regular bearing driver, seal driver, it's going to destroy this, and this little spring thing here will come flying off, and then it's useless. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of grease, pack it in here, so when I'm pounding on it that it doesn't fly out. And I'm going to use a little piece of plumbing pipe here. It is the right diameter for that, and I'm just going to tap in it lightly, get it in there, and we should all be good. Okay, I got that packed full of grease. So before I start reassembly here, any of those metal particles that were in the oil, they might be suspended in the axle tube here. So I'm going to pull a rag through there just to make sure that everything is cleaned out. Then I'm going to put a magnet on the diff cover to collect any shavings that might be in there. Okay, we're ready to install the pinion, and we're going to put the flange on there, and then the nut. I had to get a new nut because I had to grind on it to get it locked there. So you have this crush sleeve here. You have to buy a brand new one. It's a one-time deal, so if you screw this next step up, you're going to have to take it apart and redo it. So this crush sleeve here will push on the other bearing that's in there, and it'll preload the bearing. There's a specification here. If your bearings are brand new, it is 18 to 29 inch-pounds. And if it is a used bearing, it's 16 or 8 to 14 inch-pounds of drag on there. So I have the differential all wiped out. What I'm going to do is go ahead, take some gear lube here and pour it in this bearing. Make sure it's nice and lubricated. Then I'm going to install this, and then the flange, and then the nut. And then we have to brace the flange so we can tighten it up. And you want to check it every single 8th turn, because if you go too far you'll have to redo it, and this is like a $30 part. Okay, I'm going to put a little Loctite on our pinion nut here and then start tightening it down a little bit. Okay, you may have to hold the pinion, reach your arm around, hold the pinion on the other side, and tap the yoke on there a little bit with a soft hammer. Now I'll go ahead and I'm going to hit it with the impact, and we're going to just take the end play out of it. An inch-pound torque wrench on here at the lowest setting, and then we're going to spin this around and see if it clicks. You should have a dial one. I don't happen to have one of those, so we'll just keep increasing the tension on there until we achieve our 28 inch-pounds. Okay, you're going to get to a certain point where you're not going to be able to hold on to the flange anymore. So what I did is I took a old lawnmower blade and I bolted it to the flange, not in the holes that the drive shaft will bolt on, but the other holes. I went and I bolted that on there with some grade 8 bolts, and I'm going to take an impact. It's really helpful if you have one. If not, just to get the end play out, and then we're going to go and do it very small increments. It's going to take a little while to get that crush washer so we have the right amount of preload. If you don't have that, you're going to have a noisy rear end. Okay, I got it to the point where my impact is ineffective. It's maxed out, and I still have a little bit of end play, so I'm going to have to take a breaker bar and go ahead and do it the Armstrong method. Okay, I ran out of arm strength, so I had to put it on my floor jack there. I suggest you wear some eye protection and be careful doing that to get the slack out. Okay, it took about an hour. I just, in very small increments towards the end, I would just barely move this nut, and then I would take my little brace off, and now I have this torque wrench here set at 24 inch-pounds, and it just clicks right before it starts moving, and at 30 it just keeps going around, so I think it's set right. So now that the pinion bearings are set right, I'm going to take a punch and go ahead and seat this nut here, and I'm going to take my little depth gauge that I made when I first took it off, just to double check that that's set correctly. Okay, I took a hammer and punched it in where that little slot is so the nut won't back out. Okay, have our carrier all cleaned up with some brake clean, and we're gonna put some lubricant, some gear lube on the bearings, put the bearing end caps on, and once they're up in the carrier is up in the differential, you'll have to take a small or a soft mallet and tap them in there, and then put your caps on, and then we're gonna torque the caps to 77 foot-pounds. Okay, got it up in there. You have to make sure you have your shims in there. That's what determines your valve or your gear lash. And looks good here, rotates good, so we'll go ahead and put our bearing caps on. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little grease on the teeth here, and I'm going to check the gear pattern on there, both directions. I'll put a little pressure on the ring gear here and rotate the yoke and take a look at the pattern. Okay, I looked at the spec here, and I looked at our grease pattern on here, and it looks very similar to that. And now what I'm going to do is take a dial indicator and then place it on one of these teeth here, and I'm going to rotate this gear back and forth, the ring gear, to see how much it moves. So for checking the backlash on your pinion and ring on a Ford differential, there is a spec, and it is between 8 thousandths and 12 thousandths of an inch. What you want to do is get a dial indicator, place it on one of the teeth towards the end, then go and zero out your dial indicator, holding your pinion straight from moving. You want to take and rotate your ring gear here. So I'll go ahead and rotate that and check our measurement there, and it's about 9 thousandths of an inch. So we're within spec for a street vehicle. Okay, we're going to reassemble the carrier there with the spider gears. What you're going to want to do is on the very top here, you want to make sure that you have that O-ring in there in place. That helps hold the clip in. And what we're going to do, I cleaned the shaft up with some brake clean. Now I'm going to put some axle lube on there. Okay, I got some axle lube down there, as well as on the splines on top. You want to inspect your grease seal, your oil seal here. Make sure that that's in good shape. And I'm just going to put a little bit of gear lube on the bearing so it slides in easier. And we'll go ahead and reassemble this. Okay, I got the gears all cleaned up. What I'll do is put some gear oil on here. Place these on the back side. With that, it'll stick to it, as well as the smaller gears. Go ahead and do that. These will stick to it now, and when we go and pick it up, it won't fall off. Okay, I got the one side in. We're going to put the other side in, and the smaller gears. I'm going to put the pin in there, and then that'll hold it together, and then we'll shove the axles through. I'll take the pin out and shove the axles through, put the C-clips in. Okay, to get those small gears in there, one has to go from the top and then one on the bottom. Rotate your side gear there and it'll pull them in. They have to be in the same spot to get them to line up. I did slide the pin in there temporarily and make sure it's lined up. Now I'm going to go and push my axle seals, or my axles through, and put the C-clips on. Okay, with both of those C-clips in there, push the axle back. Now we'll install our pin. For installing our pin, you're going to want to clean it off real good. We'll put a little gear lube on it, and then on the bolt, on the threads there, we're going to put some Vibratite 122. That's maximum oil resistance. And if you don't have this, you can use 243 Loctite. I placed a magnet on the diff cover towards the bottom that'll correspond down here by this little sump area. And what we'll do is go ahead and place our RTV around here. We'll let that dry for about an hour, and in the meantime we'll go and put our wheels back on. Okay, it's been about an hour, so I want to make sure that this surface here is completely clean of any oil. Just wipe it down real good, and put my RTV on the back side here, and we'll go ahead, put it up there very carefully, trying to line the holes up so we don't smear it around. And then I'll start putting some of the bolts in. And I do have my magnet here way on the bottom to collect any filings that might get contaminated in the oil. Well, we'll go around and snug all these up. Okay, I went all the way around and snugged them down until the RTV started squirting out a little bit. Now we'll leave this dry overnight, preferably if you can, and we'll go ahead and hook the yoke back up to the drive shaft. Don't forget to run your wires back on there. Okay, we're lining the paint mark up on the flange to the U-joint on the back of the drive shaft. And we put Loctite on the bolts, and we're going to torque those to 77 foot-pounds. Okay, have the transmission in park. We're going to put it on the ground now, and then we'll fill it with gear lube. This particular axle takes 5.5 pints, which is 2.5 quarts, and we're going to fill it until it starts running out the plug hole there. Once that stops running out, then we can go ahead and put our drain plug in, or our fill plug. It is a 3/8 drive. I'll go ahead and torque the wheel lugs. Okay, it's down to a little drip there, so we'll go ahead and put the fill plug in. Okay, reinstalled the tire heat shield. We'll put the spare tire back on, and we can take it for a test drive. Unblock the front wheels. Driving down the road, nice and quiet.